Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. I'm in a hotel room, you could probably tell, in New York City if you're watching on YouTube. Matt Norlander is home in Connecticut. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. All right, Deadleg, you spent part of the month of July bouncing around the grassroots circuit. With first-year Florida coach Todd Golden and his staff. You published a two-part series on the experience. Part one dropped Thursday. Smooth little 20-minute read. Those are always fun.
It was smooth. Now, I don't know if you read through the whole thing, but if you did,
I read through the whole thing while I was
that not a breezy 20 minutes though? It did, and let me just say something about this. That algorithm is messed up. That's not a 20-minute read. That probably takes you about 13, 14 minutes. So you can shave a couple minutes off with that.
Yeah. I walked to a little Mexican place on 8th Avenue and ordered a queso fundido, and I read 20 minutes of Matt Norlander with Todd Golden. That's how I spent my dinner last night. Okay. Sipping water, waiting on a queso fundido, and reading a Matt Norlander story. Part two coming today. Tell us what you learned hanging and traveling with the man who has been hired to make Florida basketball nationally relevant again.
Before I make this about me, can I make it about you real quick? Right.
Sure.
Again?
Yeah.
I thought about, all right, so the genesis of this whole story was back in May, thinking about looking at the recruiting calendar, thinking about Peach Jam and trying to get ideas of what I could write and what would be out there, because each year Peach Jam there are storylines to write, but I wanted to try and do something a little bit different after being particularly Peach Jam focused last year after there was no Peach Jam in 2020. And I thought, well, when's the last time? Because a few years ago I did one day with an unnamed coach, and he basically spilled his guts all on background with any identification, and that story received a lot of recognition in this team and readership. So I thought maybe I can do this one more time, but this time, like, I'll disclose who I'm going to be with and try and get as much as possible. And I thought, well, the last time this happened, it's been like a full decade plus. I think it was 2011. If it wasn't 2011, it was 2012. You did this, but I don't think you did what I did. I did 5 days, start to finish, with Florida and Todd Golden. I think maybe you did 1 or 2 days, but did you not do this with one Tom Izzo a decade plus ago at Peach Jam, right?
It wasn't at Peach Jam, but I did do it with Tom Izzo. It was July 2011, and this was when the LeBron James Skills Academy was a thing. So that was in Akron. And I think the two places we might have started in Indianapolis and then went to Akron, or started in Akron and then went to Indianapolis, but it was maybe 3 days with Tom Izzo, and it was the same deal, like private planes, and they actually had somebody drive from Michigan State to where we were, like the Michigan State van, like, tricked out, sort of drive from one location to another within Indianapolis, if we were in Indianapolis, wherever we were. So that they could travel in style while on the road. And then obviously the private plane, and, we stayed at the same hotel. We were every minute that we weren't sleeping, we were together. That's the truth. And it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely good. Served as a little bit of an inspiration, but it had been 11 years since we had done something like this. Plus Golden, he's young, new coach, first time ever running a program. And while sure, there would be something to say about doing this for 4 or 5 days on the road with a mid-major program and like enduring the grind of significant commercial flights, I was like, no, I'm going to do this with a school that has private planes, because you can also, for storytelling purposes, you can just get, and it's detailed in the story, you can get faster from one place to another. Like it is such a major difference. So a few takeaways from this. One is that for Golden, the jump up and how he can recruit, not just in program prestige, but private air travel is absurd. I'd only been able to be on a private plane once before in my life before this. So I had experienced it literally on one flight, but I took 5 flights in 4 days or whatever it was. And Parrish, I know you know that, but to explain to the audience, the difference is Grand Canyon sized from flying commercial versus going up to a private airport, pulling up and you are on the plane and in the air anywhere from 5 to 12 minutes later. I mean, it's a complete joke. And it's necessary in these recruiting wars where if you're a head coach, the more players you can get in front of, the better, because the idea is that, the more places you can be seen, maybe that helps you overall in recruiting. But having said that, a lot of the story, and this gets into it deeper in part 2, is that Golden, he's taking this approach of having the Florida job. And while you might think young guy, 37, second youngest coach of a power conference team to John Shire, who will be 35 in less than a month here. Golden's 37. You'd expect a lot of energy and maybe this go, get him. We're going to see, try and get as many, offers out there, scholarship interest. We're going to make noise in Florida, beyond, recruit the country nationally. Parrish, that's not exactly what's happening here. Some of this is detailed in part 1. And again, there's more in part 2. But what I found interesting was that Golden is basically in no rush to recruit high school players. And the approach he's taking right now, obviously I want your thoughts on this. They would have been basically a fireable offense 5 or 6 years ago. But now the way Golden looks at this, it's a necessary part of the job. He is going to prioritize the transfer portal every single spring. He told me, unless we have a top 50 level kind of player, and we know that as a freshman, they can come in and we expect them to be significant contributors, like borderline starting level players. And if not a starter, like one of the two guys off the bench kind of deal, our priority will be the transfer portal, and it will be getting the best possible talent out of the state of Florida. And then we'll see where pieces can fit, because the way he's building at Parrish, he's expecting freshmen to understand if you're not super talented, you're probably not getting a lot of playing time your first year. It's one thing for John Calipari, even though obviously he plays super talented freshman GP. It's one thing for Cal to kind of use this tactic and recruit aggressively and be very upfront and transparent. I was surprised to learn just how patient Golden is. Like, they don't have a lot of scholarship offers out to a lot of guys right now. And he basically told me the recruiting model is outdated. The way that a lot of coaches, in his opinion, are still looking at how you're going out in April and July is not the way that he's going to do this. He did not, when he got the job, he didn't go on the road to recruit in July once for high school players. They recruited transfers. Obviously, the portal and immediate eligibility has changed all of this, but I found it interesting. I know you read part 1. Part 2 is literally going up as we're recording here. So you're missing a little bit of some of the context to what he was talking about. That'll be linked in the story, but just your thoughts on Golden taking this kind of approach, because there's no guarantee it will work. Obviously, so many coaches are leaning into the portal GP, but to hear the head coach at a power conference at a significant program, top 25 level like Florida, say, we're not going to prioritize high school recruiting nearly as much as it was done 2-3 years ago. And the transfer portal, we will be getting guys annually and heavily. Just, your takeaways on Golden's crack at this Florida job, and if you think this will work.
I don't know if it'll work for him. And I don't mean that in any other way than it can't work for everybody. There are winners and losers every season. Guys get hired and guys get fired every year. But I think this is the right approach to recruiting at the high major level in this era of college basketball. Like I was about to say, in the column, that's the smartest thing I thought he said. His approach to recruiting high school players. But, and I don't mean this, and you'll get the point, I don't know that it's smart as much as it should be a no-brainer. Like, if I was the head coach at a place like Florida right now, I would only recruit 5-star and borderline 5-star guys that I thought I could get. I don't want somebody ranked 85th in the country in his high school class. I don't want somebody ranked 115th in the country in his high school class, because like Todd explained, and I think he's right, if that guy cannot play for you as a freshman, he's probably not going to be on your campus as a sophomore because of the transfer portal. And I was going to say the one-time transfer waiver, but now it's a million-time transfer waiver. You could transfer whenever you want to. So I really think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to watch how this plays out going forward, not just at Florida, but around the country. I think what you're going to find is a whole bunch of players ranked between 75 and 200 in their high school class who used to get offers routinely from a Kansas and a Florida and a Indiana and a UCLA. And those offers just aren't going to be there anymore for these exact reasons. A guy ranked 115th in the country probably can't play for Kansas as a freshman or Florida as a freshman. So prioritize the transfer portal, leave that guy alone, and only take high-end freshmen that can compete in their first year and blend them with transfers and your returning players. To me, that is the recipe to recruiting in this era.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that is going to wind up being a recipe. Now, he did say there are other programs. He did name a program, and this is in part 2. I withheld the name of the program that he said is not taking this approach, and to him, it's not the right. Now, we'll see how that SEC program does, and GP, I'll tell you offline, but it's certainly, he was not afraid to, like, even Golden said, I think this was in part 1, he's not going to try and recruit top 15 players and waste his time. He said, unless a top 15 level kind of player, top 20 level kind of player, which is either one and done or borderline one and done, unless they are from Florida or they are a Gator fan,
right,
like, he is not going to waste his time. He's not going to do this. And part of that is, after being at San Francisco as an assistant, as head coach, the one thing that gets obviously old real quick, and I know plenty of coaches do wind up listening to this podcast at the mid and low major level. So what I'm about to say is going to hit home a ton. You find a player, almost nobody cares about it. Your competition for a recruit is schools at your level, maybe even below your level. Maybe you're the first guy even in on them, and you put this time in for sometimes well over a year, maybe sometimes even close to 2 years, and then the player gets bigger, gets better, and then he starts getting noticed. And what happened with Golden, with a number of guys at San Francisco, is they were in on him, spent about a year recruiting the player, and then suddenly he's just a tick up above WCC level, and he's gone. Or the second UCLA or Cal, Berkeley, Stanford get a look at him, they give him an offer, they're gone. He's not going to mess around. And I thought it was notable for the head coach at Florida, again, really a good case. This is a top 20 job in the country, to say, I'm not going to waste my time with a top 15 prospect, because if the Blue Bloods get in there, if Kentucky, Duke, Carolina, Kansas, they start getting in there and getting mixed, what are we doing this for? You know, it's actually the same thing. Coincidentally enough, the first day I was in Chicago, Brad Stevens was there to watch his son, so I got to talk with Brad for a bit, and it was a wonderful conversation. But that was the thing that Brad had mentioned, was because we got to talking about his current job and his time at Butler and all this stuff in the state of college hoops, all of it. But he got into like why I was there and what I was watching, and all these coaches are all around. And he said, man, the thing I really don't miss at all, the thing that I could not stand, was finishing second in recruiting. I could not stand it. I could handle getting out early, or if you tell us we're not close, it's fine. I hated finishing second. And Golden's kind of the same way. So to hear him say, we're going to recruit the best players we possibly can, but there's also, there is something of a ceiling, with the exception of if there's I want to be clear on this. If there's a player that's 50 minutes from Florida's campus that lives in Florida that they're recruiting, that they think they've got a viable shot, that's a top 10 player in the country, yeah, they're going to recruit him. But if it's this number 16 overall prospect and he's from, the middle of Texas, Florida's probably not going to get involved in that kind of guy. So Golden's he's a bright dude. There's plenty of people who are skeptical whether he can make this work. The jump from USF to UF is significant. Some people think he will. Some people think he won't. We don't know the answer to that. But I did not sense, and I mentioned this in part 2, I didn't sense being with him, granted it is the middle of July, GP, I didn't sense a lot of pressure with him. Like, he didn't seem to be overwhelmed, put together a really good staff. He even also mixed in, this ends part 1 and goes into part 2. I don't know how many other coaches did this, but it's his first offseason. He went home. Like, they were on the road Wednesday into Thursday, Chicago. He goes back to Gainesville to practice with his team. All but 2 players were on campus. Then did a 7 a.m. morning practice before he went on the road. And the biggest reason why he did that was it was really important to him. They retained like 6 guys to show the guys, like, the people that mean the most to us are the guys that are actually on our roster right now. Every single person that is attending the University of Florida and playing for the men's basketball program means more than any single recruit that's out there. So we wanted to show that to him and prove it. And I don't know how many coaches did that, but that was an interesting, unexpected. I didn't know that going into the assignment, that he was going to say, actually, I'm bailing on the recruiting trail for about 18 hours here to get in a practice at the end of one afternoon and a workout the next morning. It was pretty enlightening overall.
A whole bunch of stuff here. As for you mentioned, some people are skeptical that this will work. Todd Golden at Florida, because it's such a big jump from San Francisco to Florida. It's a big jump in terms of the size of the program and the expectations of the program. It's a big jump, like, geographically from California to Florida.
And he's not from that area. I'll also include this real quick, GP. He's not from that area. He went to St. Mary's, cut his teeth at Columbia, spent 2 seasons, one as an assistant under Bruce Pearl at Auburn. So quick stop in the SEC, and then now to USF. Go ahead.
Yeah. So listen, there are guys that I think are going to be home run hires who just, can't ever get it off the ground sometimes at schools like this. So, very few things in this profession are certainties. Rick Pitino was always a certainty. John Calipari, a certainty. Bill Self, a certainty. But outside of that, we'll see. But I thought the hire was totally sensible. Young guy, super smart, quality coach, did great things at a place that hadn't done great things in a long time. Like, checks a lot of boxes for me. I'll believe in those guys and think that they'll figure out how to get it done. But as always, we'll see. In terms of not recruiting, top 15 guys, 5-star guys, unless they're from Florida or have some sort of Florida ties, I think that's mostly right. Although I don't know if they were top 15 guys, but they were certainly 5-star prospects. Corey Brewer was from Tennessee and went to Florida.
Well, he did mention, he mentions basically
Bradley
Florida,
Bill,
nearby states, Tennessee, and then East Coast. But yes, continue. But Golden brought that up in conversation. He researched every single good player on every single good Florida team to determine what's been the blueprint. Like, the dude, he's smart. He does his research, so he did think this out. Keep going.
Corey Brewer from Tennessee, Bradley Bill's from St. Louis. They both ended up at Florida. So I think you can get those recruiting wins in certain places, but being smart about it and knowing where to pick your spots, like that's a key part of recruiting. There was a coach, I won't name him, but he was at a Power 5 job, and I thought of this when you were talking about the Brad Stevens thing. He was always in there with these 5-star guys, and then he would always lose, finish 3rd or finish 5th. He'd make the top 5, but he'd never finish 1st. So he was in there with all these guys every year and never got them, because at the end of the day, they'd go to Duke or Kentucky or North Carolina or wherever. And I remember talking to another coach one time, and he said that guy's going to get fired because he's chasing the wrong people every single year. Like he gets off on getting listed as they're going to get a visit from this 5-star. And like, what is the point? If the guy's not coming with you, so why are you wasting your time? You'd be so much smarter, instead of prioritizing these 3 5-stars that you're not going to get. Prioritize the 3 4-stars that you actually can get, and don't waste the time, because that by the time you miss on these 5-star guys that you were never going to get, and everybody knew you were never going to get, the other 3 guys have already picked where they're going. And now what are you doing? And that guy ultimately did get fired. It's interesting. Brad said the thing he hated the most was finishing 2nd in recruiting. Because I had this conversation with him one time, and also had the conversation with, I guess it was Cody Zeller.
Does
this make sense?
Yes.
Like, Brad was like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, we're coming off, and I hope the timing is right. Either way, you'll get the point. We're coming off back-to-back appearances in the national title game. He's an in-state guy. I have a great relationship with him. Like, and at the end of the day, I cannot beat Indiana. At the end of the day, I'm at Butler. I'm not beating Indiana for that guy. Like, and he more or less told me, if I remember correctly, like, when that happened, when I realized we've been to title games, we've been nationally ranked, we've had pros, I've got a great relationship with the family, but I still at Butler cannot beat Indiana for that guy. That's when it was frustrating, but also eye-opening, about, it doesn't matter how great you are. You got to have a certain type of job to get that type of guy. And Todd understanding that before he really even gets his feet underneath him at Florida, I think is wise and speaks to among the reasons I would bet on him doing well there. Another factor, he's following Michael White instead of Billy Donovan. Right. Mike did a pretty good job at Florida, but it wasn't close to like a pretty good job at Florida, but it wasn't Billy Donovan. And so, it's the old saying in the profession, you want to follow the guy after the guy, not the guy. And that's another thing working in Todd's favor. He's following the guy after the guy and not the guy. And, as you detailed in the story, you talked to Billy, and, Todd had, after getting the job, immediately reached out to Billy. They talked multiple times. I think that's not unusual. Most coaches do that, but I think it's also another thing that suggests what you just said that I don't think was in the story, not part one that I read, that he researched every good player.
Yeah, that's in part two. Yeah,
that's in part two. Okay. Yeah, but that's another smart thing. Like, let me look at how Florida has had its most success over the years. Where did these players come from? Is there some, because the other thing that suggests is, and you did point out this type of stuff in part one, when you're recruiting, sometimes you go to games just so the grassroots coach can see you there, even if you're not recruiting any of his guys, so that you can text him later and be like, hey, I liked your team.
Yes.
And another part of this is, okay, Florida got this 5-star guy or this 4-star guy from outside of our natural recruiting area back in 2012. Who did he play grassroots for? Oh, that guy's still coaching. So that guy has sent a guy to Florida before. Let's make sure I've got that relationship. All of this stuff matters.
It does. A few quickies before we move on and wrap and talk a couple other things. One, General Peach Jam thing. We were there for about a little less than 24 hours. Remains a great event. That venue is great. GP, more and more, I feel like it's almost outgrown the Riverview Park Activity Center. I don't know where you put it instead. It's iconic in that place, but man, it's just, there was no general public last year because COVID restrictions were still in place. It went back as would be this year, but you can still keep doing it there. But man, it is just, and like you add in the Bronny James factor. Now maybe we won't have a prospect on, but like, people just lining up outside these doors. It feels like a fire hazard half the time. But I love the venue and I hope it doesn't change. But part of me, when I was there, I was thinking, man, this event, even though they even expanded the venue, I don't know if it's outgrown it or not, but I do love the place. Golden, one of his go-to radio stations on Spotify or whatever, Counting Crows. There is a Counting Crows reference in the story there, which I appreciated. You'll notice in part two, Golden and Kevin Hovde, who's one of the assistants there, they are quoted, but they are talking about players and the players aren't identified. The one thing about this story that I had to write around, and it was really tough, and frankly, there was like 3 or 4 really good anecdotes that they were kind of talking about, because I was, everything was on background, but almost nothing was off the record. But you can't be quoted talking about players that aren't committed to and signed to your program. It's a violation. Like, I could have easily written this story and like gotten Golden staff just, assaulted with NCAA violations because you can't speak about prospects. So that was the other tricky part. If you read part 2, you'll notice they're talking about players. Sometimes you can't really, by design, you can't tell who they are talking about. But in exchange for not identifying the prospects they're looking at, I wanted to instead have you get their unfiltered thoughts about some of these players. And they looked at, I probably saw north of 12 with Golden over the course of 4+ days there. So again, really cool assignment. Happy to get to do it. Love the job. My thanks to the bosses at CBS for letting me do it. And obviously Florida, like, Golden was up for it because, let's be honest here, like, it also probably helps him. But Florida's administration also had to clear, having someone not employed by the university to go on the plane and do all that stuff. So good stuff. It'll be linked in the podcast, and that's the big end of July project. Just a real insight as to what it means, not just to run a program, but literally to take it after you've never been there. And I thought Golden did a pretty good job of painting what is a somewhat complex picture.
If you haven't read it yet, you can find it at cbssports.com. Moving on, a couple of significant recruiting developments this week. Kentucky got a 5-star prospect. Iowa State got a 5-star prospect. We'll get into those things next. But first, a word from our sponsors.
You ready?
They're coming.
Hang on.
Showtime.
I won't sleep until he's in the ground.
Go, 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 go!
What are you waiting for?
I'm jumping out a window! Oh, sorry. Good luck.
So there were a couple of significant recruiting developments this week. Kentucky got a commitment from five-star prospect Justin Edwards. Iowa State got a commitment from five-star prospect Omaha Ballou. I wrote a column after Edwards committed to Kentucky. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, Omaha Ballou to Iowa State. He's ranked 12th in the class of 2023. Makes him, according to the Iowa State Daily, the highest-rated recruit in Iowa State men's basketball history. Big get for TJ Otzelberger. He convinced the five-star in-state product to stay home. Some background, Norlander. You know what? Do you know why Omaha Ballou is named Omaha?
I can only draw one conclusion to that, my man. His parents were huge Counting Crows fans, and that he was born in the city of Omaha.
He was born in Omaha, and his parents just said, F it, let's call him Omaha.
If that's the case, hold on. If that's the case, and we get named that, what's your name? I'll give you mine after. What are you named?
Memphis Parish. I was born in Memphis.
Parish. I would be Denver Norlander.
Norlander.
Coincidentally enough, the SID at Florida's first name
is Denver.
So there we go.
Yeah, I would be Memphis Parish, Denver Norlander, and Omaha Ballou. When I saw this, my first thought was good for TJ Otzelberger, because Iowa State's now got the number 3 ranked recruiting class in 2023. Right now, they've got 3 players committed, 2 top 35 guys, and including Omaha Ballou, who again is ranked 12th in the class of 2023. My second thought was, remember when Iowa State fans were concerned they were just going to be a feeder system for the Blue Bloods when Tyrese Hunter entered the transfer portal? They were all up in arms. They thought it was the end of everything for Iowa State possessing talent within the program. And now here you are. Here's the top 3 recruiting classes in America right now: Duke, Kentucky, and Iowa State.
All right. Chances Iowa State is Duke, Kentucky, Iowa State when we look up in 3 months.
Oh, probably not. But like, but let's.
Hey, I'm not trying to bring them down. But hey, look good right now. But these,
let's live in the moment, Norlander.
All right, we're living in the moment. How about this though? All seriousness, Otzelberger doing this is yet another thing in his short tenure so far at Iowa State that is giving Cyclones fans not just optimism for the future, but validation over. It got so dismal under Steve Prohm. They were like, I don't want to hear the excuses about COVID and all. No, we need a complete reboot. Sometimes that happens and a fan base is correct. Sometimes it happens and a fan base might be misguided. In this case, all indications were that Iowa State fans, and obviously the administration, they had to wanted to do it as well and buy Prohm out of his contract. They were right. Getting a 5-star talent. This is the exact by the way, this is the exact thing Golden was talking about. In-state high-level talent. If Omaha was an in-state talent in Illinois, how confident are we that Iowa State gets him? Or if he's out in California, there's no shot. But he had a chance there. Otzelberger gets it done, and now the Cyclones moving forward have even more to look forward to after Iowa State clearly overachieved relative to expectations last season in TJ's first year.
So that was a big get for Iowa State. It came shortly after Kentucky added another 5-star. That is Justin Edwards, 6'7" wing, ranked 3rd in the class of 2023. He is the 3rd 5-star prospect in this class to commit to Kentucky. Robert Dillingham, a point guard, is another, and Reed Shepherd, a combo guard, is another. So Kentucky now has the 2nd best recruiting class in America, Duke with the 1st. And I didn't want to use that development to write about, John Calipari's recruiting at a high level, because like that's never not been the case. So what I decided to do on Monday night after this news was made official with Justin Edwards committing to Kentucky live on CBS Sports HQ is revisit something that I remember saying basically every time in advance of name, image, and likeness rights becoming a reality about what would happen when name, image, and likeness rights became a reality. Because in advance of it becoming a real thing, which was last July, so it's been here for about a year now, we spent, and other people spent, years talking about what would it look like, what would it do, how would it change the sport. And one of the things I consistently said whenever this conversation was brought up is that obviously student athletes will have, in some cases, lots and lots and lots of money in their pockets, legally above board. More players will get money than some people are telling you. Do you remember the people who were screaming, this will only be this only matter for a handful of guys? Well, that's obviously not true. I insisted that would not be the case. And I said, you know what? It's not going to change the order of things very much, if at all. The teams that prioritize men's basketball now and are good at it, they'll continue to prioritize it and be good at it. I said consistently, if you look at the 5 national champions pre-NIL and the 5 recruiting classes pre-NIL, and then once we get 5 years post-NIL and do the exact same thing, it won't look much different at all. And now here we are. Pre-NIL, for a 5-year stretch, the number 1 and number 2 recruiting classes in the country in some order were Duke and Kentucky. Now here we are post-NIL. Duke and Kentucky have the 2 best recruiting classes. We've had 1 national champion since name, image, and likeness rights became a reality. It's a blue blood, Kansas. The preseason number 1 is either going to be Gonzaga, which has been number 1 pre-NIL, or North Carolina, which is another blue blood. If you look at the 4 best recruiting classes right now, according to 24/7 Sports, Duke, Kentucky, Iowa State, UConn, Baylor, that's the top 5. Those programs, 4 of those 5, won 4 of the final 9 NCAA tournaments before name, image, and likeness rights became a reality. Those programs, of course, being Duke, Kentucky, UConn, and Baylor. So I just thought it was a perfect reason, or opportunity rather, to revisit that point. Name, image, and likeness is here. Players in some cases are becoming multi-millionaires, but the way we observe the sport, what matters, what doesn't, who matters, who doesn't, who's good, who's not, who's recruiting, who isn't, it all looks roughly the same with rare exception.
Okay, so a couple things here. One, I realized this at the tail end of my Florida trip, just to the graphic we have on the screen here on the YouTube. If you are watching, go ahead and nudge that like button if you could. NIL as a topic in general, it basically almost never came up with Golden and his staff. Not that it's not there. Florida has a collective and it's building it out, and not that it isn't still a factor, but I almost didn't realize until it was near the end of the trip. I was like, we've barely talked about how NIL is impacting the way that Golden is trying to recruit his program. Not that it isn't there, but clearly that was not, at least it wasn't something at front of conversation in the here and the now. Now I did, in the process of being on the road, I did wind up talking to a couple other coaches, and that still winds up being one of the bigger things. And even Stevens, in Chicago, that was like one of the first things he brought up in terms of like, where's the sport going? What are your thoughts? And et cetera, et cetera. I think for the most part, you are correct. There will and should be situations where players that might have gone elsewhere are going to have opportunities to go to a certain school, either relatively close to where they are. And you can make this case for Omaha, sure, I guess, but also elsewhere where they have an opportunity to make more because they might be guy 2, 3, or 4 as opposed to guy 6, 7, 8 at a higher school. And also on this note, I won't share names, I won't share schools here, but when I was on the plane with Golden, I think flying back from Chicago, there was discussion about a couple of players on the transfer market who wound up going places. Like Florida looked, the net went wide when it came to transfers. And there were a couple of players who they wondered if they might get real interest from. And then they came to learn that a couple of players that they didn't get went elsewhere. And this is something Golden told me on the record. Like, they did not and have not and are not promising a single cent to any player in NIL. It's more like, get here, we are building something. But if you are coming to us and saying, what can you give me? It's not going to be like, well, we can maybe get you 50. They're not even entertaining that conversation. Other schools are.
Yeah, I would say I've said multiple times in this podcast, like, that's smart by Todd. That's right. I don't think that's smart. If you're not talking money right now at the high major level, you're going to miss out on some guys.
Well, I think also he literally can't. But I know what you're saying, Parrish. I know what you're saying. I got you.
Other people are.
I know. And so that very point with NIL, a couple of players who, my bottom line with this, GP, is this. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of transfers. I definitely would register these guys as top 40, top 50 level transfers that are going to play places next season that if NIL wasn't in place, I don't think they wind up going to those schools. And so I think that's good for those programs, though. That's great. Let the market bear out, and let's get a couple of guys who are talented, maybe going to spots they wouldn't have. But broadly, I think in basketball, and particularly at the top, which is the point of your column, GP, I think this was a breezy 3 minutes, maybe even 2 minutes, by the way. I mean, you were in and out. My man was picking up the food and gone. Yeah, quick takeout order there.
Yeah, I wasn't messing. I'm not messing around. I could say everything I need to say in 650 words.
There you go. Which is a wonderful throwback to the Choops Arena blog era. You're right. At the very top, it looks that way. But I do like, for now, live in the moment. Recruiting rankings, Iowa State third. We do get these exceptions to the rule here and there.
Yeah, but the Iowa State thing, and I'm not trying to diminish it, but it's like, because there's a top 15 guy who was raised in Iowa and has literally said it was my dream to go to Iowa State. And so like that's the explanation for that. In addition to, I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm assuming name, image, and likeness plays some role there as well, but like, whatever, that's an explanation. But that's the other thing NIL does, is it can give you, as you pointed out, if you're not a blue blood, but still a high major program, one way to maybe compete against them is to prioritize a certain guy and say, we're the ones who can make you, you're the top ranked recruit in our class. You'd be the fourth in theirs. And we can get you more in NIL than they're going to be able to get you. Like, this is something we talked about, for years before this became a reality as well. All it takes is one super wealthy guy saying, I want this basketball program to matter in recruiting. I'm willing to spend literally millions of dollars in name, image, and likeness deals in recruiting. And I don't care who you are. Like, if Penn State wanted to have a top 10 recruiting class, if they had a booster who was willing to spend $20 million to make it happen, that could happen. Like that, and so that's another interesting aspect of it. Yes, Duke and Kentucky are going to flourish in this space, but literally anybody, or not anybody, but lots of schools can, if they've got the right money behind it. And it's all, I know there's some gray area, but
yes,
it's happening. It's happening.
One follow-up on this, GP. Media days for football are happening. Pac-12 is literally going on as we're recording this podcast on Friday morning. SEC was last week. Big 10 has happened. Big 12 has happened. ACC has happened. So the five big conferences in football have either concluded or are about to conclude here. And a couple of commissioners continue to express not just the idea that they need federal oversight on how to do this, whether that's going to happen or not. I don't want to get down that rabbit hole, but I have heard a little bit more from those, and then a coach on the trail last week was saying that they were talking to their AD, and they want to figure out a way to cap name, image, and likeness. I don't think this is happening. Like, I know it's kind of a big question here, GP, and
that's called illegal.
Yeah, right, exactly. So
hey, here's what, next time a coach tells you they want to cap name, image, and likeness for student athletes, ask them if they want to cap coaching salaries.
Exactly. But yet, it's just wowing, Parrish. I'm not saying all coaches believe it, because they don't, but there is this notion still out there of like, can't we get our arms around this thing and make it so that we can, it's still college. They're still technically not professionals. I'm never surprised by what comes out of the mouth of administrators, but this is still, make no mistake about it, while some people in the industry and the greater college sports industrial complex are in favor of NIL, I would say even some are in favor of doing open market capitalism at its most extreme. There's still a significant portion of people that are looking at ways of trying to make rules again. Saban, I think Saban said this as well. If he didn't, my apologies to the greatest football coach in the history of the sport, where they want to put a cap on it. And it feels like behind the scenes, they're still trying to figure out, is there any possible way that we can do this? So it just ties into our NIL discussion here. And I don't know.
We'll spend a lot of time on this some other time, but like that would have to be collectively bargained. You would have to allow student athletes to the reason you can have a salary cap in the NFL or a salary cap in the NBA is because it's collectively bargained. They want to treat student athletes like something other than employees and not allow them to unionize, at which point you can't collectively bargain with them. And then if you try to cap what they're earning, like the Supreme Court has told them, you'll lose.
I know.
So I think ultimately we could get to a place where there is what amounts to a salary cap, and college basketball programs have general managers, player personnel, president of basketball operations, people like that. But that'll be a day that comes after we're calling football players and men's basketball players and perhaps other student athletes, employees.
Yeah.
And we're paying them, and then we collectively bargain, the terms of our agreement. I do actually think we will get there someday, but that's where you got to get before you can start trying to cap what these student athletes can make. That's what the courts have already shown us.
This really is a topic for another time. We don't have the time for it, but the question becomes, when you do that, do you do it on sport by sport basis? You can't unionize NCAA athletes overall. The interests of a field hockey player are not the interests of the starting quarterback at the University of Georgia. They're not the same. You're never going to be able to unionize that big. So if you go sport by sport, even within that, how are you represented? It's not that it can't be done. Doing it would be really hard. And there's evidence to suggest the strength of such a union might actually be, it might not be beneficial to plenty of college athletes in that space. But yes, there's also conversation about, on a conference by conference basis, can you establish rules as a league and say, if you come here, just understand that our rules in regard to name, image, and likeness, you can make this, but the numbers that were put out there with me was like, we just don't think a player should have at the college level should be capable of inducing recruiting payments, which is all part of this, and making north of $5 million a year, while one of his teammates has nothing. I don't care.
It's so stupid.
I don't care, Parrish. I'm just telling you, this is still out there and being discussed over whether or not they can. It's antithetical, but I just
Tom Brady makes more than his teammates. It's fine. Juan Soto is going to make more than his teammates. It's fine.
More than the rest of the damn team, man.
Damian Lillard makes more than his teammates. It's fine. Why is it such a problem in college locker rooms if one guy's getting more money than the other guy?
Yeah, I know.
It's that all these theories can just be swatted out of the air. I got another one for you. John Calipari makes more than other SEC coaches and other coaches on his staff. Somehow they managed to. It's fine. The Georgia football coach just got $112 million. It's fine.
The Georgia coach's contract actually is what's sparked a conversation with a coach.
Well, Nick Saban, who is awesome and brilliant in many ways. That goes without saying. But at SEC Media Day, he was like, I'm just worried about the competitive balance of the sport.
It's not Nick Saban's job to worry about the competitive
balance. Well, first off, there is no competitive balance in the sport. You think there's competitive balance between what Alabama is doing and what Kansas State is doing? Like, what are we talking about? And, it's like, some schools can pay more for players than other schools. Is that fair? Well, some schools can pay more for coaches than other schools. Is that fair?
Right.
Like my alma mater lost its last 2 football coaches to Power 5 schools that could pay more. That's just the way it works. And no coach has a problem with that. But when it comes to players, they got a real problem with the competitive balance. It's all nonsense. this isn't nearly the problem a lot of them make it out to be in terms of the amounts of money going around. It's just new, and people complain about new things because it's not what they it's not the business they are now and I am understanding of this. They are not working in the business that they were working in when they got into the business. And I am understanding of that. It is way different. This ain't what they signed up for.
Nope.
But it is what they're in, and it's not as bad as they think. I don't think. Let's get out of here. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck. Shouts to Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening. Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. 5 stars. Nice review at Apple. There's more of us than there are of them. We will talk to you again real soon. Till then.